People who have adult children that don't talk to you. Why do you think that is? Story 1, Mom here. My 23-year-old hasn't spoken to me in 4 years. It was completely my fault. I've struggled with addiction, alcohol, and for most of her childhood I was bad. I hope to be able to apologize to her someday. But I completely understand and respect her decision. Story 2. My daughter went through a traumatic event when she found out her mom was having an affair with a junkie. Daughter was furious at her mom for destroying the family. Mom flipped out, threatened suicide to our daughter's face, blaming her. At that moment, everything shifted and daughter became the nurturer to her mom, who regressed into childhood. A complete switching of roles when my daughter really needed a mom. Mom wasn't safe to be angry at, for fear she'd kill herself. So I became the target. We talk, but it's so terse and superficial that it's close to non-communication. I'd like to talk through what happened, even in a therapeutic setting, but my daughter says that's off the table. Story 3 from the other parent's perspective. My adult children, 25 and 23, do not communicate with their father at all. Long story short, he remarried about a week after our divorce was final, and he and his new wife went on to have children of their own. Over time, his visits with the children became more infrequent and stressful due to his wife's distaste for me and my children. He has had no contact with the kids in over 3 years, and his previous attempt was 4 years before that. My youngest says he will never forgive his father for replacing us all with a new family and forgetting us. The oldest says it's just not worth chasing someone who has no interest. Personally, I'm sad and angry on their behalf. He divorced me, not them. Story 4. There's a woman at church, and every week she asks for prayers during prayer requests. At first, I thought it was kind of cute, but it's over a year later and she always asks for prayers so that her children will speak with her again. She claims to have been the best mother, and, one by one, all 3 of her adult children and thus her grandchildren stopped speaking with her. But she did everything right. She fed them, she clothed them, she put them through school. Which to me sounds like the bare minimum that you're supposed to do as a parent and not everything. But okay, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But then, every week, another piece of the puzzle would come out. She tried calling, but her numbers were blocked. She tried to find them on social media, but she's blocked. How strange. She says she was such an excellent mother. Why would they block her? She tried reaching out again and received a handwritten letter on why she should never contact them again, but we never heard the contents of the letter. We were just supposed to pity her and have sympathy and assume that these entire separate groups of people were evil and were doing her emotional harm. I got to know her, and she is an abusive narcissist and nothing short of pure evil. All the red flags you'd expect are there. But every week it's pray to Jesus for me, everybody. My evil, ungrateful children, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to hope she is just clueless, but I understand she is sick and probably doesn't know how horrible she really is. I feel very, very bad for her kids, but very happy they were strong enough to break away from that hot mess. It almost brings me physical pain now when she asks for prayers that her kids will talk to her again, because I know all she wants to do is resume hurting them. Story 5. My stepdaughter is an addict and mentally ill. Her son was placed in our custody by the state 3 years ago at 13 months old, and she has never made the effort to regain custody. Her rights were terminated last year, and we adopted him last month when the state gave us the choice. She has hated us ever since he was placed here and has convinced herself that we stole her child. She only contacted my husband if she wanted money, which he won't give her, so that makes her hate us more. Story 6. My father would say that my mother lied and manipulated us into taking her side during the divorce. The truth is that he boasted to me about pulling a gun on her to teach her a lesson, and then didn't understand why I thought that was unacceptable. I haven't spoken to him in a decade since that discussion. To this day, I believe he was contemplating murder-suicide or family annihilation. Story 7. I know this wasn't the point of this post, but I am a grown child. 5 years ago, on Thanksgiving no less, my mother told me my wife and I are bad parents because our daughter is an only child. Then followed it up by saying my wife graduated from a terrible high school. Not sure where that came from. She then topped it off with an ugly racist remark about my white sister-in-law being married to a black man. Lastly, she said I was not allowed to tell my wife any of this. That lasted about 45 seconds. And that was the end of that. Story 8. I'm a parent of a child who does still talk to me, but rarely, and I fully accept that it is my fault. I was an immature parent and made some bad decisions in addition to being inconsistent with my parenting due to immaturity. I am also on the spectrum, but that's something I didn't find out until a few years ago when my son was diagnosed. I know I wasn't great, and I understand my daughter, and I try to give her space. Story 9, my son hasn't spoken to me in over 10 years. He had behavioral issues as a teen. I took him to doctor after doctor to get him help. He ended up in a partial hospitalization program. He had them fooled for weeks that there was nothing wrong with him, but one day it all came crashing down. After that, he deteriorated quickly in that program. We had come to the point where he was either going to full hospitalization, a boys' school for troubled teens, or he was going to be arrested for assault. His father, whom he only saw maybe twice a year, didn't want that and said he wanted to take custody of him. The program would only let that happen if my son was enrolled in a comparable program with his father. Father said, of course. Didn't happen. My son grew up and was a terror to his father and had little to no contact with me. He got arrested a few times. After one particularly bad fight with his father, he got kicked out. After a few months, my son contacted me on Mother's Day. He told me he was in the Marines and was done with basic training and was going to be given an assignment soon. I'll never forget how proud I felt of my son then. Shortly after, I got contacted by the Marines, asking if I knew where my son was. He went AWOL the day after Mother's Day. After a few years without contact, he contacted me again, said he was doing much better and wanted to visit me. I said yes. I should have known when I had to pay for his bus ticket that he wasn't better. He stayed with me for a few days and I thought all was well. Not so much, 2 days after he left, I got a call from my credit card company. He stole my card and put $1,600 of airsoft pistols on it. I was given the choice to pay it or call it fraud, in which case the credit card company would press charges. I called it fraud. I haven't seen him since. I'm still his friend on Facebook and have seen that he poses as a wounded Iraq vet. That is disgusting and shows me he hasn't changed at all. That's why I don't talk to him. Story 10. I'm 39 and rarely talk with my mother anymore. Anytime I do, she has to bring it around to Republican talking points, and no matter how often I change the subject or just express that I hate hearing that shit, she won't fucking stop doing it. I don't think she fully appreciates how completely impossible it would be for me to ever believe in any of that bullshit. She thinks I'm almost there but just have yet to see the light. She's also just wildly paranoid in general, and always has these ridiculous theories about her neighbors plotting against her that are just depressing to listen to. I really tried to be a good adult son with her. I used to call her once a week. I flew out to her city and visited twice per year, despite the fact that she has literally never come to visit me in the 20 years I've been out of the house, except the one time when she needed a place to stay for her sister's funeral. She's just completely lost in a world of delusion, paranoia, and narcissism. Story 11. I'm not going to get into detailed specifics, but my wife's son refuses contact with her. He was a very troubled kid the entirety of his childhood. We found out way too late that his father had been sexually abusing him since he was very young. There were signs, and my wife was aware of some physical abuse, but as she was being abused as well, she never saw the full extent of it. He, the father, was very good at hiding the sexual abuse, and any questioning of situations or behavior was met with violence. She got away, and eventually we were married when her son was just starting his teens. He was in therapy, but issues continued: stealing, lying, vandalism, violent outburst, etc., and it became worse when his father was murdered in a drug incident. Everything finally came to a head when he was caught showing my daughter, 8 at the time, he was 15, porn and masturbating in front of her. We removed him from our home and with the help of his therapist had him placed in a home for kids with issues like his. His problems still continued until he was removed from that home to an institution after a sexual incident that involved another resident. He spent months in that facility, and when it came time for him to be released, we arranged for him to live with some of my family that could provide a safe space for him to continue his treatment and finish high school. This was when he finally came forward with the sexual abuse he had endured under his father. It practically broke my wife, and she still blames herself for not seeing it and not getting him out sooner. Things seemed to be going well for him, and we started to include him in functions with the rest of the family. My daughter doesn't remember the incident, but has received counseling regardless. Finally, he graduates high school, and his very next move is to pack up his stuff and move out of my family's house where he had been living and into some family of his late father's. Over the course of the next few months, he gets more and more distant, stops therapy, stops calling or texting, and stops responding to our calls and texts. He changed his number, didn't reach out to his mother on her birthday or Mother's Day, and pretty much went no contact then. A last-ditch effort by us was to just show up where he was living and try to connect with him. He and my wife spent hours crying and talking, and we thought things could move forward, but we were wrong as he gave my wife a fake number and blocked her on any social media he had. Over the past few years, I've found his contact info, usually emails attached to socials, and reached out to him begging him to just text his mother and let her know he was okay. And I would get an unhinged reply that I was invading his space and that he would decide when the time was right to contact her. My wife has felt defeated, but over time she has resolved herself to this new normal with her son. A couple of months ago, he sent her a long Facebook message basically renouncing everything he had admitted about his father, as well as abuses he had perpetuated that we knew about, blaming my wife for her failed marriage with his abusive father, and then marriage to me, a person he evidently hates, making his father a martyr that was murdered in cold blood, and essentially telling her that until she begs his forgiveness for all the wrongs she caused him, he will never talk to her again and hope she rots in hell. She was very hurt, of course, but she didn't respond. He obviously still needs loads of mental help, but we don't have the strength to go through all of that again, nor put our other children through all of that again. He's an adult now, and he's going to have to figure it out on his own. We'll still be here for him when he gets it together and comes around. Such is life. Story 12. I know of a distant family cousin whose parents fired him from their very successful family business because he refused to take his wife and children to their church and worship the way they did. In retaliation, he and his wife refused to allow his parents to see the grandchildren. They sued. They lost. They never were able to see their grandchildren and eventually died. He ended up with the business anyway by default, not by the will. They lost decades of grandchildren just by being stubborn. Nobody in the family had anything to do with them the last 35 years of their lives, and they were miserable. Fuck them. Story 13. So I have one grown child. My wife and I divorced when they were young. My ex was in a relationship with a child abuser, not hyperbole. He went to prison when my kids were in their late teens. My ex is very narcissistic. She and her new hubby had no problems with alimentation between me and them. My weekend to pick them up? Whoops, they had a road trip. I get them over the summer? Sure. Hell, take some extra time, no rush. Plans for the summer while the kids are with me. Then threatening to call the feds if I don't have them back immediately. So that was their mom's side of things. I wound up in a relationship with another toxic woman. She would be good to the kids in front of me and shit when my back was turned. When I finally saw what she was doing, we split. Still, damage was done. During the initial divorce, I was in a bad place. My kids were my world, and they were just gone. Broke me, and made me not the best father to be around. I wasn't there even when I was present. My ex decided she was moving, and the kids couldn't come with her. I lived in another state by then. I had 2 days to find a truck and go get them. During this time, the child abuse allegations came out about their stepdad. Their mom made it all about her. While my relationship with my kids improved after leaving Crazy Woman 2, it never fully recovered. My oldest and I are closer, and I appreciate it. He has no contact with either his sister and his mother. My youngest and I are at peace. We aren't as close as I would like, which is a shame. But I understand. There's no way to make up for not being there. I'm now married to a lovely woman. The kids, grown, love her. Her daughter considers my son her brother, though he was grown by the time this dynamic started. I won't say it was all the doing of my ex. I wasn't present. Life takes you places you don't want to go, like it or not. So now, I just take those relationships as they come and try not to push myself too hard into their lives. Story 14, kind of off the main point here. I had a child I gave up for adoption at birth, primarily because I was a single mother with a 4-year-old. I worked. I was always tired. It was the right thing. Fast forward 12 years, I'm surprised by a knock at the door. It was his adopted parents. And when back came, all the trauma and pain and confusion as they felt he would benefit from knowing me. He didn't. I became anxious about the relationship and he eventually quit coming around. I think I was a disappointment to him, and I'm sorry. He has not stayed in touch in spite of now distant attempts. I haven't tried in 3 years. He's happier, and so am I. Story 15. My sister doesn't speak to one of her kids. They have gone through spurts of not talking to her. She expects too much of people. She's very entitled. She doesn't follow through on commitments. She still owes me a wedding quilt she started, married 43 years now. She's always the person who is hard done by. Nothing works out for her. She wants to be taken care of, that's all. She thinks she should get to spend her money as she pleases, and someone else should subsidize her lifestyle because that's what she wants. She has burned through all her options and is on the verge of homelessness. She's manipulative and a taker. She doesn't do anything terrible, no drugs, booze, or gambling, and appears to be very sweet and caring. But she really believes she's owed much more and she shouldn't have to do anything to have it. She apparently abused her son who took her in. I have no clue what she did or didn't do, but it was enough that he booted her out. I'm sure there were conditions set in place when he took her in, and I'm sure she ignored the conditions and did as she pleased. Why do I think that? Because that's what she did to me. She always has her reasons, and everyone else is unreasonable. It's that old nut about doing the same thing over and over but expecting a different result. I feel bad for her, but man, she just keeps throwing herself off cliffs. Story 16. I'm a dad whose 17-year-old daughter does not want to live with me. Does that count? I raised her myself. Started a business from home to support and be there. Give unconditional love, hold boundaries, support her, and challenge her. We had a beautiful relationship until she turned 13 and got into drugs and sex. Started running away to avoid my rules. Would steal my car and come home drunk. Rules. No drugs, respect my boundaries, grounded if you break the rules. I sent her to an all-girls school in Utah. She doesn't ever want to live with me again. For all you judgmental assholes, go fuck yourselves. My daughter has extreme trauma, and her mom did drugs in the womb. Our family also has a history of mental illness. She is pure of heart, but with too much shit piled on top. I would not be surprised if she turned into the very parent you all demonize. Does that make her a monster? Does that make me a monster? No. Her mom was the monster, and she and I suffer for it. But she will soon be an adult, and the trauma choices she is making will be fully her fault. I hope she finds another way before it is too late. Story 17. I'm lucky. Both my adult children call me multiple times a week, but my ex, their father, complains that our daughter rarely calls him. I've told him many times that if he wants her to call more often, he needs to listen to her. He's a pretty narcissistic dude who only wants to talk, and if he takes a breath and you try to jump into the conversation, he either gets louder to drown you out, or he goes dead silent, clearly in his waiting until you shut up so I can talk mode. He never asks questions or expresses any interest in their lives. My son puts up with it because he can direct some of the conversation by bringing up sports or interesting historical stuff or books or whatever, and then they can have somewhat of a discourse, although listening to the inevitable droning lecture is always included. My daughter has little patience for that, so she rarely calls him. Even after I told him what he should try, he ignored me, which is what he did for nearly the entirety of our marriage. He still periodically bemoans the fact that she doesn't call. Story 18. I am a parent. My now adult children and I do not have a relationship and have gone years without speaking to each other. This began after their father took his own life. I moved on and began another, which is my current relationship, and they are still grieving the loss of their father. It was too soon for them. We are in the beginning stages of family therapy, and I am hopeful that we can learn to have a healthy relationship with one another. Please take care of your mental health. Our world shattered that day. This is really hard to write down. I will never have words to convey all that was lost for so many people because of his death. If I ever get the chance to have a relationship with my children again, I will have healthy boundaries while showing them how much I love and care for them. Story 19. I wasn't the best father. Even though my kids wanted for nothing all through their time before leaving home, I had my own issues when they were young and was distant and emotionally abusive. When I realized what I had been doing, it was too late. As they grew up, we had no common interests even as I supported them in theirs. They avoided me unless absolutely necessary for things they needed for projects or school. Counseling helped, but emotionally they have no connection to me at all. I don't hold anything against them. I know it's on me. I hope they can have healthier relationships with their kids if they have any. Story 20. My daughter went no contact, off and on, for a couple of years when she became involved with a psychopath who gaslighted us all and brainwashed her into believing her dad and I were the bad guys. We were out of our league, never having dealt with something like this before, and mostly helpless in it. It was the absolute worst thing we've all ever gone through. Aged us still sickens me to think of it. Thank goodness she got away from him, and although she suffers from PTSD because of it, she is now okay and we have reconnected. I understand there are toxic parents, and I understand that is the reason many people go no contact with them, for self-protection. Please, be absolutely sure that the relationship is totally not salvageable before calling it quits because so much hurt is hard to bear. My own parents are total fox brains, but I put that aside and just don't engage in politics because the parents I love are still there somewhere, and I won't give up on them.